So as we are recording this, I have my Bloomberg open. In the US today, natural gas is trading for $8. And in Europe, it's $58. And in Asia, it's $45. So what do those numbers mean? Let's put it in a framework that people can understand. In order to convert what a price of natural gas means relative, say, dollars per barrel oil, you take the price of natural gas and you multiply it by 6. That's a good rule of thumb. So if we just round up and say the price of natural gas in Europe is $60 today, that's the equivalent of $360 a barrel oil. Now, natural gas is a really important, right at the front end of our supply chain, critical input. So for $360 a barrel equivalent, you are paying that amount to heat your homes, to make your fertilizer, and to burn it to create electricity. So what does that mean? That means that in Germany today, year ahead, baseload power is 400 euros per megawatt hour. That's up from 50 euros per megawatt hour 2 years ago. You have an 8-fold increase in the price of electricity. No economy can withstand that, and that's why you see, for the first time in decades, Germany actually had a current account deficit. It had more imports than it did exports, as measured in euros. And this is shocking for a manufacturing powerhouse like Germany. So if they hold out, they will suffer a massive, massive recession / potentially depression. And we shall see. And so you have today natural gas in the US trading at $50 a barrel oil versus $350 a barrel oil in Europe. This is why you see China turning so rapidly back to coal. News broke this morning that China has stopped working with the US on climate change. They're going to build out
a convenience, over Taiwan, right? But
Ms. Pelosi goes to Taiwan, and now we can build as many coal plants as we want. Climate obligations be damned. And so you're going to see, like, the price of coal is $400 a ton. It was $40 or $50 a ton 2 years ago. So you're seeing these massive, incomprehensibly large spikes in primary energy, which can only find its way through down the value chain, and it's going to crush the European manufacturing sector. There's just no two ways about it. And so if you're, let's say you're a fertilizer producer, and your plant is in Europe, fertilizer is priced globally. If your plant is in the US, and that's where your competitor sits, they're paying $8 per million BTU for their natural gas, and you're paying 60. You shut your plant. You can't compete. Alternatively, if you're the person in the US, you're printing cash because you're making money on that spread. So until the natural gas market globalizes, and we could talk about what's needed for that to happen, you're seeing these generational arbitrage opportunities that were unthinkable 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Which is where we're seeing the incredible profits coming out of the commodity traders, right?
Depending on where their plants are located, yeah.
Where does this end up with the food story, though? Are we, what's the timeline for holding out on this? Because if I'm sort of understanding right, this is pretty bad news for Ukraine and pretty good news for Russia, right? Because it just is ultimately unsustainable. And as the current options on the table, the current sanctions are ultimately making too much pain, or will be making too much pain, particularly for Europe.
Yeah, so it's two parts of that question. What is the short-term consequence, and then what is the long-term consequence? In the short term, it erodes Ukraine's situation to the advantage of Putin. Absent this energy leverage, I think the military performance would have put him in a far worse circumstance. I think we could agree on that. But he has this advantage, and we gave it to him, and shame on us for doing it, which is a point we've been making for long before he went to war in Ukraine. We wrote a piece last fall called Putin's Fools Rush In. And we just assumed that nobody would want to put themselves in the position that Germany finds itself now, and that they would fold, and that Nord Stream 2 would come online. That didn't happen. He invaded Ukraine. Nord Stream 2 did not come online. We didn't think he would invade Ukraine. That was a mistake we made. He did. I think he overplayed his hand. I think there were more economical concessions he could have extracted, much to the benefit of him and his society. He chose to go to war. That was his fault. But here we are. That weapon that we gave him is the only thing that is sort of standing in the way of his complete collapse. He has that weapon today. So in the short term, all those things are true. In the long term, one really important thing has to happen, which is a globalization of natural gas. It is not a global market today because there does not exist sufficient export and import capacities in the places that are long and short to make one global price for natural gas a possibility. Now, there will never be one global price. There isn't one global price for oil. But oil is traded much more tightly because it is a liquid and easier to transport. Because of this crisis, it is inevitable that that arbitrage, that generational arbitrage we discussed, will have to close. And once those plants are built, the LNG export facilities in the US, in Australia, in Qatar, in Russia, and then once those LNG import facilities to receive that natural gas are built, particularly in Europe, but in parts of Australia and parts of the US as well, you will see a far tighter spread of natural gas globally, which will have the net effect of bringing down the price of natural gas in aggregate. It'll go up in the places where it's cheap today, and it'll come down in the places where it's expensive. And then that will make a far more stable global fertilizer market, which will then hopefully stabilize food production. So that is the sort of the thermodynamic end state, but the activation barrier, the kinetic activation barrier to get there is the pain that we're going to have to suffer for the next few years. But until we resolve what's happening in Germany for the winter, it's hard to say. And so the question is the pain that is about to be suffered by the, I say German, but I speak more broadly, Western European citizenry, is that pain enough to trigger sort of a reconnection with physics, as we would say?